Hello, everyone. Welcome to what is unbelievably our seventh episode of Finding the Unicorn podcast. Who would have thought we made it past our third month, or nearly into our third month? Dan, how are you feeling?
Chris, number seven. We've had some technical difficulties today, hence why I'm smiling a little bit, as there were some pre technology frustrations, which still got me giggling a little bit. But yeah,
Yep,
we made it. We made it.
today's been tough, and now we are watching everyone leave work early and head off to the nearest bar, while we are here educating the continent on all things tech and recruitment. But here we are. Um,
Let's do it.
quite an exciting episode today, I think. So Montash spent a little bit of time in the past 2 months doing quite a large survey of candidates across Europe to try and find out what their expectations are for pay over the next 12 months and into the future. Kind of framed with this whole great resignation, everyone's leaving, the world's coming to an end, wages are doubling, everyone's gonna be rich, but no one's gonna have a job, all this sort of stuff. So this week, we have published the latest, we published our survey with a summary. And I thought that today would be a good chance to go through some of those points one by one and get your expert feedback and your commentary on that and see what your thoughts. So I think for me, there's a few things that are quite surprising out of there. But also there's a few things which absolutely aren't surprising, and there's probably lots of hiring managers all over the country, all over Europe, who are looking at and thinking the exact same thing. So I mean, Dan, you've seen the reports, you see the different questions. I mean, it was quite a simple questionnaire. I think it was 10 or 11 questions. Anything that stands out for you where you thought, oh, do you know what, that's a bit surprising, or anything general you want to comment before we dive into it?
I think what I definitely would say is, like you said, interesting time of year to do it. Interesting time of year, and interesting time that we're living in, with, like you say, framed by the Great Resignation. Is that media myth? Is that social media hyperbole? We can definitely dive into that a little bit more on this podcast. But as a general comment, there are some surprising results, and there are some which I think, based on the conversations I've been having with clients and candidates over the last few months, this really rings true. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so see, the survey went out, and we had lots of responses. So a few things just to break down to begin with, I think, just to make sure that we're all, everyone's in the same boat. So who are the people who responded? So 99% of the people are in Europe. So this is a generally a European survey. There's a pretty even mixture of freelance contract candidates versus perm candidates. It's about 60% freelance, 40% perm. And the people who have come back are generally managers and above. So we're talking about 80% are mid-management and above. So we're not talking entry-level people here. So I thought quite useful to kind of frame the survey with that in mind. So let's dive straight in. And first question is quite an open topic, open question, and it's simply, how satisfied are you with your current pay? And it's a scale of 1 to 5. And again, this is something that surprised me. With talk of the Great Resignation and how people are very unhappy with their jobs and how COVID has changed and they're looking to take on these exciting new roles in the digital world. What surprised me is that just under 60% of the people said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their current level of pay. And I guess that's a per man contract. Surprisingly for me, there was a slight increase when it was contract. 62% against 58%, that sort of thing. So quite small. Does that surprise you?
Definitely surprising. I think when I was reflecting on the results from this particular question, it goes back to that we sometimes get caught in the media suggestions or some of the overhype on social media platforms like LinkedIn, where you see the polls daily and the wage inflation and all these kind of things. But from my experience, having conversations with candidates over the last few months, I think one thing I can draw from this is that it's not just finance, right? If anything, these last 18 months, 24 months, if you're a candidate in the technology space, whether perm or freelance, um, and we looking at some of the other data throughout the rest of the survey, it's backed up quite nicely by the fact that flexible working and other elements of employee value propositions, or EVPs as they're commonly known, are really really important to people. And financially, I think it's good to understand that a lot of people are working from home now. So financially, they're not facing the burdens of perhaps commuting multiple hours a day, or they're not buying food and drink and things like that, right? And if you're in a city like you look at like at Munich in Germany, or Berlin, or Zurich, um, these sorts of expenses can really lower what you're taking home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because people are saying here that they are generally happy with it. Well, they are satisfied with their pay. But would you say that it's still the main driver for people leaving and people taking on roles?
I think it depends on the increase. That's how I'm going to answer the question for now. If we look, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but one of the questions that we asked in the survey was, what percentage increase would make you consider changing your role immediately?
Hmm.
And an overwhelming 70+% answered 21% plus, with more than half of that 70% voting that it would take a 31% plus increase,
Hmm.
right? So I think with that data, we can see that, like, yeah, it depends on the increase. I think sometimes finances can play such a role in a new offer where you're almost silly to turn it down. And I see more often than not that finances will play that kind of role, unless the candidate doesn't need that money in his or her life as much as perhaps they need more time with their children, or they want to just work 3 or 4 days a week now, and they've got multiple holiday homes, or whatever the situation may be.
Sure. Um, so typically a year ago, or even, but let's go 2 years ago. Let's go 2019, pre-pandemic, pre-COVID. Would you expect a 10% pay increase would be enough to tempt a contractor, a freelance worker to
No,
no?
no, not 10%. I'd be very surprised if someone were to move a project that they were enjoying. The technology was exciting. They were engaged every day. They had good communication with the client, and they felt like they were being valued within the project. If
Hmm.
somebody was to move purely for 10%, that's not, in my experience, what was happening 2 years ago, and certainly wouldn't happen now.
Hmm.
That's where I think this survey has kind of hit the nail on the head with what I've seen over the last couple of years, where a 20 to 30+% increase, people are much more open to discussing that, and that really does start to pique people's interests.
Yeah, I mean, this question in particular is basically about the question is almost what is going to make you either break your contract or move roles, and I guess 70% of people would consider that a well, okay, 40% of people would consider a 30% increase in their pay enough to make the move, which I think is probably about right.
Yeah.
But I was quite surprised that 30%, so 1 in 3 people, would consider an 11% increase, because that's one of the bandings, 11 to 20%, enough to make the move. Um,
Hmm.
that seems quite low to me. Is that? Is that something that you're experiencing right now? Is that something you think has changed? Would you be concerned about a candidate getting a 10% or 11% increase, and that would make them leave?
Again, I think the way we've asked the question in the survey is extremely interesting, right? That we've worded it. What increase in pay would make you consider changing your role?
Hmm.
Don't think that takes into account potentially the way people have answered it, the other elements of an employee value proposition, whether that be remote working, flexible working, unlimited holiday is a big one now. Which for anyone that doesn't know, unlimited holiday can mean we trust you as an employee. We're not going to cap your days, but we will base what you deliver on outputs. And a lot of my clients have implemented that, and it's really basing the relationship from the outset on like a trust and outputs model, which seems to be working great from the clients I work with and the candidates I work with on a whole. I can't speak for all, but on a whole. So I would imagine that 1 in 3 that would look at a 10 to 20% increase in pay would also be looking at other factors. Is that uh, a sideways move, a lateral move in terms of job title, or is that a big step up in terms of seniority? As you mentioned at the start, we've got a real mixture here between permanent and freelance candidates.
Yeah.
And generally, as we know, if you're permanent, moving your way up the career ladder in terms of a job title can sometimes be really, really important to people, right? If you want to take that step from developer or engineer into a more managerial role, that may hold more weight for you at the point in your career than a 30% pay increase, for
Hmm.
example.
If you're a manager looking at this information here, aware of the quote unquote great resignation, aware of people looking to move, LinkedIn, for example, have spoken about there's a 25% people who are moving jobs right now around the world, which fits into what we understood of 1 in 4. Now, it feels like tech might be a little bit different. It feels like tech, because it's not been as struck by the pandemic, because it's been very, very quickly able to move to a remote work, it's not been affected quite as much. I've completely forgotten what my question was gonna be.
That's fine. I can help you. You were saying I guess your question is what would my advice be to managers within technology clients looking at this data, managing their teams, right? And how do they retain those people? How do they understand the reasons why people move? As we know, 25% of job transitions are up 25% since 2019. That is a statistic that you should be taken seriously. If you are a manager in technology, you should be taking that statistic very seriously. If you are working business critical projects, right? Because um, people are on the lookout. There are more and more um, recruitment agencies, more and more consultancies, more and more technology clients that are vying for the talent that sits within your business. So understand and really, when it comes to the leadership within your teams, understand the why of the individuals in your teams. Why are they there? What makes them tick? Um, Delve as much as possible into what their motivations are, what their needs are they there for is financial motivation their biggest why, or is it the technology, is it the career progression,
Yeah.
is it the step up and added responsibilities? And as a technology leader, I think sometimes you can get overwhelmed or bogged down in the day-to-day achievements of hitting those project milestones, those go lives, those important technological moments. But if you don't have the people to come with you on that journey, then you're going to run into a load of roadblocks, right?
Mm. Is this something that they should be keeping them awake at night, looking at, only 9.4% of people would actually not move for a pay rise? Is that something that would keep them up at night? Should they be thinking, okay, we need to be putting budget aside because these people might be getting offers, and we may need to match them if we want to keep them? Is that a realistic thing that a manager or an HR department should be doing?
Most definitely. So I think I touched on this on one of our previous podcast episodes about the importance of tracking as best you can, at least quarterly or half yearly, the relevant market data for the types of positions that you hire for. For example, I interact with a lot of DevOps engineers across Europe, particularly in Germany. I would say around 2018, 2019, the pay rates were probably anywhere between the 70 to 90, 95 an hour mark in euros at a sort of media to senior level. As we look today, 2.5 years on, that's anywhere between 100 and 110 euros an hour. Now, if you've had an external consultant sat within the business for an 18-month period, those sorts of statistics demonstrate how much the market moves financially to equate for both inflation but also external competition. And yeah, as a HR department, as a procurement department, as a technology leader, you should be feeding this back and making sure that your business can adjust accordingly. Otherwise, you will miss out on talent.
Yeah. It's one of the interesting things that we looked at, going onto a different question, which is surrounding this expectation of pay. Now, there is this talk of the Great Resignation. There is talk of hyperinflation. There is talk of general upward pressure on wages, on rates. But again, what I found really surprising with this in the back of my mind when these stats came back was obviously how happy these people are with their pay. But also, if you look at the next 3 months, one of the questions was, how likely do you believe your pay will increase in the next 3 months? And do you know what? It was actually pretty even, spread across the kind of 5 options, which were, I think it's very unlikely, all the way through to I think it's very likely that I'm going to get a pay increase over the next 3 months. Again, do you think that is surprising? Does that surprise you?
What's really interesting here is that we asked the question as well, and I think you've just touched on it there, that we asked if they how likely do you believe your pay will increase in the next 12 months?
Hmm.
And I think what these two questions demonstrate to me is that asking within the next 3 months was a real flat line across the board. That there seems to be some uncertainty. Now that could either demonstrate that they don't know. I think that's probably the most common thing to draw from that, and that probably means there's still some uncertainty as we draw the year to a close. But what I think is even more interesting is if you look at the statistics from the 12-month survey question, well over 60%, I mean 65-70% are definitely expecting a pay increase in the next 12
Mm,
months. Now, I think that's an increased confidence in market sentiment as we move into 2022. I know from the clients I've been speaking to, there's a real sort of rejuvenated energy. I think coming into next year, if I'm looking at the projects and programs that are being signed off for next year and the transformations in
yeah,
comparison to this year and particularly last, if we look at a 2 year period, next year seems to be a year that everybody's going to take advantage of, and it looks like candidates are understanding that as well, and really looking to make sure that financially they position themselves in a more advantageous position than they are now.
sure. And look, I don't want to keep talking about COVID, which is what we seem to talk about every podcast episode, but it really does seem like it's, put a marker in the sand of what was before and what was after. And, technology was a marker which dropped a little bit when there's a lot of uncertainty, then it's picked up and it's really started to gather force. Um, and I think I sent some kind of facts over to you about how technology workers have increased and this real desire. So, just looking at the most popular jobs in Germany for the past 6 months, top two: software engineer, JavaScript developer. But also in the top 10, solution architect, backend developer, DevOps engineer, product manager. You know, these aren't new roles, but I'm not sure if we would have seen this 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And in fact, again, according to this is based on LinkedIn's data.
Yeah.
The increase in some of these roles compared to 2019 is unbelievable. So a full stack developer has increased 4 times um, in demand since 2019. A data engineer 5 times. A JavaScript developer 8 times. It's a great time to be in tech. It's a great time to be a kind of a tech worker, right? But that leads to a lot of stress and lots of pressure on the workforce, especially when COVID has led to this hyper increase in digital transformations, people moving to the cloud, um, and obviously even from that's from a B2B, from a business perspective, but also a consumer perspective. Consumers are now much more likely to work in a digital space. We heard about the metaverse recently. Companies are now having to quickly upskill, quickly ramp up their moves to digital if they haven't done already. And if they have, they're looking to ramp it up and move it on to the next stage. Is next year going to be even more of a squeeze than this year?
Yes. Yeah, for sure, for sure, right? While we're on so I'm not surprised to see software engineer at the top. I'm actually not surprised to see that at all. The world it has been and is moving in that direction. Uh, to hear those numbers, the one that was 8 times, was that JavaScript developer?
Yeah,
Or,
JavaScript developer. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, to hear that is quite a shocking statistic, and we are going to see the skill gap and also the skill shortage, which is a great time to get into technology, right? I think over the next 5 years, hopefully that gap decreases. Hopefully, we see more and more people interested in technology from younger ages and get involved in the technology space a lot younger, and I think we will. Um, but the statistics are crazy. I saw something the other day that was for every one Salesforce job, there is one candidate. No, did I just say four? I meant 24. For every 24 Salesforce jobs, there is one candidate, which that's an eye-watering statistic, right? And by the sounds of your numbers with the software engineers, sounds like that's heading in a similar direction.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think we're getting to kind of record breaking, aren't we? In terms of roles available. But I think one of the good things about the transformation to remote working is that there's now much more of a global workforce than there was previously, and you can go and find the best candidates anywhere across the world, which is different to what it was before. Um, one of the things we'll come on to is remote work, and it's a topic which we speak about a lot in here. How candidates want to work remotely, how remote work has opened up this whole new box of opportunities which weren't there before. Um, but the increase is very real, and again, this is another LinkedIn stat. Um, from 2021 this year to 2020 last year, there's been a 76% increase in the number of paid roles offering remote work. And, we're now way over 1 in 10 roles are offering remote work. And that is quite staggering, isn't it, really? And looking at our survey, one of the big things which I was quite interested in was how people are judging what impacts their decision. And the question we asked was, which are the most important things when deciding on a new company or employer? And remote working came in third. Now, this is obviously aimed at tech workers who are probably the most digital native remote working natives that there are. Does that surprise you that number 3 is so high?
No, it actually doesn't. And comparing it to the other data, so correct me if I'm wrong, but office location was like the staggering.
It was last, yeah.
Um, yeah, it was the most important thing, and I think based on the conversations I've been having, particularly over the last 6 months, now that we're coming off the ripple effects of the C word, people are missing osmosis. They're missing interaction. They're missing the ability to stand with their colleagues and share a coffee, share ideas in real time.
Sorry, so Dan, so that was last in importance.
Office location was last in importance.
Yeah.
I'm still surprised. I still think what I said holds true about osmosis and people wanting to be together in the office.
Mhm.
But remote working being third, what came second and first? Because I can see financial well-being was also high up, and then
Yeah,
what?
so number 1 was financial well-being, and probably unsurprisingly, 65% of the people put that as their first or second choice. It was quite
Mhm.
significantly in front of everything else. I think especially with the number of freelancers we have doing this survey, that doesn't make a surprise. Second and third, for me, they are very much COVID things. So second and third were work-life balance.
Yeah.
Um, and 70% of people picked that as their first, second, or third work-life balance. And then number third was remote working. And actually, a quarter of people actually put that as their first and most important thing when deciding on a job. So can you imagine 1 in 4 people in tech now think that the ability to work remotely is the most important factor above financial above money, above finance, above career progression, above technology, above the company itself. Remote working is number one. Are managers aware of that? Do you think that, in your experience, do you think hiring managers are taking remote working seriously, or are they seeing it as a bonus?
No, I think for the most part, the managers that we are speaking to, that I am speaking to, understand this. Most managers are in a family, a family people, a family men, family women,
Mhm.
and I think that's where this is being driven from, the ability to now spend time with your loved ones, and spend time. If I talk for myself personally, I used to commute an hour into the office in the morning and an hour home in the evening. If you're a London or a city worker across Europe, an
Mhm.
hour commute each way is quite common. And now you take that and times that by the 5 working days in the week, you're looking at 10 hours a week and 40 hours a month in commute. Now to give that back to people is, I think, something quite special, right? And now it's unfortunate the circumstances that it came in, but it's allowed everybody to see what's achievable still. And I think technology is that space where it's the perfect environment for it, right?
Yeah, and you've spoken quite a lot about, in a competitive market, how can you make your role, your company stand out? And remote working seems to be one of the most important things, alongside work-life balance, which you could argue could kind of flow into remote working. In an ideal world, the more remote you are, the less chance you are commuting, like you said. The more chance you can spend with your family, maybe the more flexible that company is. It seems like it really is something that managers and companies need to take seriously.
Most definitely, most definitely, and I think they are for the most part. In There are definitely positions out there where you can't always be working remotely in technology. So my advice to candidates would be, make sure that whichever field or specialism you're going into, make sure that you understand that there could either be a lot of remote work or potentially not. If you're working on a product that's a hardware product, then perhaps you're more likely to be in the office at times. If you're working on a product that's solely software based or application based, then the likelihood is you'll, excuse me, be able to work more in a remote setting.
Yeah. And kind of heading on from that, another one of our questions was, how likely would a non-financial incentive influence your job, work, or career choices? Very common question. Um, Now it's interesting because the other question we asked was, what's the most important thing? And it was money. But this again was quite flat. It was relatively neutral across the board. Slightly, people are saying that a non-financial incentive would influence their career choices, and I think that we'd all agree it would influence to a certain extent.
Definitely.
Is it going to be the deciding factor? The stats suggest that's probably not the case. And again, with our audience, half them being contractors, that would be about right to you, wouldn't it?
Most definitely. I think that rings true. The key word there being influence. It would definitely influence, and I think the data suggests that, right? But because of our our sample of 50% perm, 50% freelancers. I think that is bang on.
Yeah. So for me, my takeaway would be, as a hiring manager, that pay, salary rates are the single biggest determiner of whether someone takes my role. But the second thing I need to be probably thinking about is how to make my job more attractive, and remote work and the work-life balance, which sometimes can be mixed, are probably the second thing. Is that your takeaway as well?
Yeah, that is the primary takeaway. If I was a technology leader right now, finance has to be first and foremost. You have to be competitive, if not exceeding expectations, because once you have that ticked and that confirmed, then everything else seems to naturally fall in place. And when I'm speaking to managers, that seems to be when they can meet those financial expectations, they're able to secure more of the talent that they're looking for.
Sure. And I guess the kind of final question we've got here is something that I think everyone has in the back of their mind, any industry, anywhere across the world. And do you agree that changing your employer or current company would increase your pay? And unsurprisingly, 6% would agree or strongly agree, and only a measly 12% think that wouldn't be the case.
Changing your employer generally does increase your pay. That is how most employers and like in the traditional sense, that's how most employers have a, I don't want to say easy, but an easier hook, right? It's black and white. It's a financial metric. Here is an increase of 10, 15, 20 plus percent. This is what we will use to attract you away from your current company. I think what's important is understanding again the motivations and the why for looking. Um, Most people that accept counter offers, generally those issues are still remaining after 6, 9, 12 months. So I think the statistics are somewhere around 80% of people that accept counter offers generally leave that company within a 12-month period anyway. So it's about understanding again, if I were to put myself in a manager's shoes of a tech organization, I would be thinking to myself, are my employee salaries in line with market? And if not, why not? And then understanding that your overall EVP is strong enough that if they receive headhunts, which they will on a daily basis,
Mhm.
that you're confident in the offering that your company has.
Yeah. I've actually got a few more questions here. I didn't actually realise I've looked over. One of them is on market rates. And, I guess that there's always this question is, what is the market rate? And, no one probably really knows unless you have thousands of input of data sources, data fields. And we ask people, do you believe this statement? My pay reflects current market rates. Again, I was quite surprised that just over 40% of people agreed or strongly agreed that their pay was at market rates, and a further 30% thought it may or may not be. It's there or thereabouts. I think that's quite surprising that only well, we're looking at just under maybe no 25% of people thought it didn't. In the era of the Great Resignation, in the era of the highly visible pay inflation, wage inflation, that it's still quite a small number which believe that their pay doesn't reflect market rates. Now, is that because it's true? Is that a lack of awareness of market rates? Or again, are we blowing this all up? Is this a kind of media myth? Is this actually not a reality?
I think there's some truth in it. I think if you are speaking to reputable recruitment consultants, reputable technology clients, but more recruitment consultants, you can get a really good gauge and understanding of your market rate in relation to your skill set. Now, if the 20% or 25% that you're referencing there that don't think their pay reflects current market rates, they may be passive candidates. They may have been sat in the same organization as a permanent employee for 5, 10, 15 years and not had those conversations with competitors, or, like I say, reputable recruitment consultants that are specialists within their given field, that can give them that data on the wider market and where they would stack up financially with their skill set.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because although that's the average here, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being I disagree that my pay reflects market rates, and 5 being I strongly agree, the average here is about 3.2. But when we ask them, are they satisfied with their pay, it comes in at 3.5. So despite the perhaps awareness that it maybe isn't quite a market rate, they're also happy with it anyway, which again is quite interesting, right?
Really interesting. Again, I think it just comes back to work-life balance is the second most important thing for people when it comes to considering a new job or staying in their current. And I think now people are and candidates are starting to understand that money perhaps isn't everything for every single position. As a freelancer, perhaps you'll take that next contract on the same money, that and you'll understand that you're not going to get a pay increase on every single on contract move, and in permanent you may take a sideward step, but that sideward step may lead on to greater progression in a shorter time, or come with more work-life balance, as we see in the previous questions. I think that's really what it suggests to me.
Yeah. Interesting times ahead. Interesting times ahead. Look,
Really
we've got
is.
1 more episode of this series, our first series of Find the Unicorn. 1 more episode before Christmas, and then we're back again next year, 2022. Hopefully, people are continuing to find this interesting. We are getting some very nice messages, which is useful. We've also had a few other agencies who work in the recruitment space talking about how they're using this to help them, which is good, I guess, in the round. So Dan, as always, it's a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you for your insight.
Thanks, Chris. Likewise.
Hopefully the survey, everyone has seen it. If not, please head to montash.com and have a look. All the data's there, all the reports is there, with a couple of our kind of summaries, which I think are quite useful. Hopefully you'll find them useful when dealing with your own talent and sourcing talent. So guys, thanks everyone, and we will see you next Tuesday for our final episode of this series, and the final one before Christmas. See you then.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Cheers, Chris.